We are back. Hopefully you had a good break and lots of good questions that you were asking Lisa. Sorry we didn't have time to get to all of them, but it was a lot of good discussion there, so I appreciate that. We're up next is our last FPDP project management case study, and we have Chaitan, Frida, and Adam that are going to be sharing what they accomplished and interesting interview that they did. So are you folks ready?
Yes, I am.
All right.
Bringing up the slides now. And let me know when you see them.
Looks good.
All right, good. So my name is Chaitan Sayal, and I'd like to introduce our triad Calm in the Storm. I have with me Frida Cargary and Adam Matuski, and our coach is Beth Weinstein that sort of helps us along the way during the FPDP program. So the project manager that we chose to interview is Lil Reichenthal. She is currently working the CRISM project with JAXA, and that is looking at providing breakthroughs in the study of formation of the universe. And it was a very interesting conversation that we had with Lil, and we'll share with you a couple of the takeaways that we had from that interview with her. So one of the first questions that we asked her is, how did she get into project management? What sort of led her down that path? And what she noted in answering that is that when she was working TRIM, the TRIM PM actually reached out to her to apply into an instrument manager position because the project manager at the time thought that she would be a good fit to it. And she never looked back. That was her first foray into management. And she said she has really enjoyed it ever since. The takeaway that we had from that is that management's not for everybody. When you get the opportunity and you want to go take on that challenge, enjoy the experience as you are in it. We then asked her what some of her biggest project management challenges were to date and how did she overcome them. And we also asked them specifically because we wanted to know a little bit more about how those challenges or different challenges that affected her in her management style in COVID-19. So the challenge that she talked about the most was her challenge on MMS. She stated that the MMS project, when she got there, was quite a challenge. There were multiple instruments that were being developed. They were all being developed by the instrument group, with Southwest Research Institute being the prime contractor there. All of those developments were being managed out of Code 500 at Goddard. And she said that the people that she inherited on the project, or it looks like
looks like we lost your presentation there.
Okay, let me try and bring it back again. Sorry for the hiccup. Do you guys see it again?
Yes, looks good.
Okay, sorry. So she said that the instruments, the team that she inherited, in her mind, was not the best team of people for the project and the challenges that they had during that project. So she actually had to get rid of 95% of the team and do a lot more hiring to bring up the team. And said eventually that ended up with a good team and the project was a success. When it came to COVID operations, she talked a little bit about CRISM and having to talk through the challenges. One of the biggest challenges in COVID that she talked about is she came up into a situation where she needed to send individuals to Japan during the pandemic. And if any of you have been involved in going and putting together restart packages to the center to get the approvals before any travel can happen during the pandemic, that required a lot. It requires a lot of coordination, and a lot of questions get asked on how every individual is going to be safe, practice the social distancing, and you can imagine when it's travel overseas, they actually had a lot more questions. So that was her biggest challenge as a project manager. The takeaway here, primarily looking at both of those, is that never give up as a project manager. Continue to push for change if you believe in it. Continue to push for something that you believe in, and at the end it will get rewarded. Next thing we kind of talked about was how important does she think strategic thinking and the big picture view is, and how that's changed in COVID-19. She said strategic thinking is one of the key important items in leading a project. She said a strategic plan is having a set of requirements, right? You need to have those requirements in place, but then you have to be flexible in modifying the plan as needed. And she said it's very important to listen to your team or experience to any modifications that are needed to that plan. And she said during COVID-19 that's become actually more important because you have to listen to that team. I think we heard one of the groups previously yesterday talk about some leaders actually want to walk through the hallways and so have that personal experience with the individual. It's very hard to have that in the COVID environment. So she stressed on the point that you need to be comfortable in asking your team to put their faces on the video feed so you can listen to their voices, listen to the tones in their voices, and pick up some of the nonverbals so that you can progress on your project. So the takeaway here is that always look for feedback from your team in creating or modifying your strategic plan. And next, I believe I will pass it along to Adam. Sorry, no, this is still mine. Next, we talked about how important is it to have any coaching or how coaching is important in project management. And her biggest takeaway here was that she said, if you haven't already done so, either take the class, Crucial Conversations, or read the book. In doing that coaching and providing that critical feedback, try and understand the situation that you're in and the situation that the other individual's in, and most of all, be honest when you're coaching. So the takeaway is Crucial Conversations are very important to have with your team. And that is a way of coaching your team to learn and get better. And now I'll pass it on to Adam to talk through.
So good morning, everyone. This is Adam Matazeski. I'm currently serving as the Geocarb Mission Deputy Project Manager. I'll be talking through some of the lessons learned from Lil with regards to COVID as well as with regards to delegation. So we first talked about the human impacts to COVID on the team and asked what she had done when COVID first started. And she said, I guess surprisingly for some of us, that she immediately recognized that some individuals on her team would need a lot more social interaction than they would normally get with mandatory telework. So she immediately reached out to them a lot more and instituted the policy, as Chayton mentioned, of keeping the video on as much as possible within her team as they work. And then I wanted to highlight the second to last bullet there as well, that with mandatory telework, really making sure that the team members know not only the near term but also the long term goals, to make sure that that you're taking into account all those small conversations and feedback that you're not getting anymore when you're doing video work. And then, as always, to balance work-life in COVID, because everybody's going through things differently. Next slide, please, Jen. And as regards the planning part, the project management part of COVID, it was somewhat refreshing that Lil's take on it was that we do this all the time, and maybe not to this extent, but project managers are constantly having to get creative and replan and figure out how to get the work done under various constraints that were unanticipated. And so to a certain extent, you can treat COVID-19 like any other unplanned event. And the example she gave that was difficult for her, but that she worked through previously, was they had never planned to deintegrate an instrument on one of her previous projects, and yet they figured out a way to do it. So the team is there to work around the hurdles. And even though COVID is unprecedented, it can just be seen as a planning challenge among many. Next slide, please, Jane. So then we talked a little good bit about delegation and not taking on too much. Her take on it is that taking on too much is really the Achilles heel of project managers, especially new project managers. You have to learn to say no. You have to set up your team and your interactions correctly at the beginning so you don't sort of become overwhelmed. Don't manage by hope. Don't set it up and then hope that it all will get better, because if you're overwhelmed and taking on too much, it almost certainly will not get better. And then lastly, the idea of coming across an issue, the monkey on your back, which you may not have dealt with before, which is hard for you to deal with, do consider passing that up, because your supervisors or leaders above you may have dealt with that particular monkey or one that looks a lot like it before. So don't hesitate to ask for help and pass along those big problems if you can't find the immediate solution yourself. Next, please. Then my last slide is to talk about really a new way of thinking about delegation. So of all the answers that Lil gave us about delegating, the one that stuck with me, because this is something I struggle with, is how I perceive the act of delegating. To try and see it as allowing a team member to participate more fully in the mission. So we're all excited about what we do and why we come to work. And so the tasks that you involve people more and more, and especially if they're difficult or challenging, are actually getting them more involved on the mission and becoming a bigger part of the core team. So don't rob them of that possibility. So try and think of it a little bit differently. That's a huge takeaway that I got from that. Delegation, it's the gift that keeps on giving. So I believe that is my last slide. I want to pass it off to Frida, who will be talking about assertiveness, decision-making, and accountability. And Frida, if you're talking, we can't hear you. Frida,
can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So I do have some voice issues, so if you don't hear me well, please forgive me. And then, I don't know, my computer is just doing some other things, so my video is not clear. So this slide, we reached out to Lou. We wanted to know what her approach was on building assertiveness, confidence, and taking initiative. And in terms of assertiveness, she said Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to ask for what you need or what you don't understand. No one expects you to know everything anyway. And many times people can sense what you don't know. In terms of building confidence, she said, do your best to have a comprehensive understanding of your project, understand the different elements of your project, you know, your scope, your schedule, your risk, and everything that is involved. And also reach out to your team members and understand their contributions to the team and how their roles tie into the overall mission of the project. Plan and prepare and organize your data so it's relatable to the audience. In other words, so the audience can connect to your information. Do not be afraid to push back, and that would be taking initiative. If you feel convicted about something, don't be intimidated by the strong personalities in the room, or if you have presented something and people keep pushing it back and you feel it's something that should be addressed, then don't be afraid to stand up. And our takeaway from this is being honest about what you don't know. And as you keep communicating to people, you also, as you keep asking questions, you also keep the lines of communications open. Next slide, please. So yes, we talked to Lou about the tools or techniques that enable proactive decision making to anticipate any problems that may arise. And she did very passionately talk about risk management. So this has nothing to do with how good you were or how well you plan. You always have to build a margin because things are going to happen. And I think we all can see that COVID happened when no one expected it. When actions come up, you can delegate or you can assign people to do things, but make sure you follow through until you get a status that says complete. Along with that, have regular updates, weekly preferably. Schedule meetings as much as you need to, because that will keep you abreast of information, which in turn avoids surprises. And the takeaway from this for us was things will happen. So plan for the unknowns. Next slide, please. So dealing with underperforming team members, ultimately fire them. She said, but that means by the time you get to that point, that means everything has failed. As a leader, as a manager, extend yourself, do everything that you can possibly do to help the individual. And if that doesn't work, or if the individual shows no signs of progress, then you fire them, because at that point, it could become toxic energy for the rest of the group. Have a conversation with them. So again, have these difficult conversations. She highly recommended the class Crucial Conversations, and address issues as soon as you see them. Don't let them linger on. Typically, in her experience, people want to do good, but sometimes they lack support because they may be going through something personal. Maybe there's a death in the family or a divorce or whatever, just life issues, and they don't know how to balance. This has worked for her 50% of the time. Also set clear expectations. Ensure people understand what exactly they are supposed to do. Sometimes it just hasn't been a good fit. She gave an example. I think she gave an example of how she was, I don't remember what project it was, and then she actually had to get rid of about 95% of the team, and she brought she just had a brand new team and things worked out perfectly well. And sometimes when you move people from one assignment to another assignment, they tend to excel. So the takeaway from this was toxic energy from one bad apple can bring down the team. Next slide, please. So we spoke to Lou about improving public speaking and making executive presentations. So the first thing she said is get to know your audience and then tailor your data to fit that audience. For example, if you're presenting to the center director, you most likely have an executive summary. But if you're presenting to lower levels of management, the lower you go, maybe the more data you'll need to include in your presentation. Have a purpose for your presentation. What are you trying to sell? Proposals are usually trying to sell something. And then finally, practice your presentation. You can do that with your peers or by yourself in the mirror, record yourself, do whatever it is that you need to do. That will also help build your confidence. And the takeaway from this is understand your audience and also have a purposeful presentation. And that, I believe, concludes our presentation. So we can take questions. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, folks. Very good job. And we have a list of some questions and just a few minutes left. So let's go to the first one from Karina. How did she go about removing 95% of the team? Did she have support from her management on that decision?
Yes, so she said that she didn't specifically go through the process of how she had to get rid of the team that was there on MMS, but she did. It was a skill mix of civil servants and contractors, and so she had to work through the various sources to go get the replacements in place.
That might be a good action for follow-up as next time you talk to her is to maybe get some more details on how do you do that, because that is pretty drastic. Mm-hmm. Next one's from Joe. How long did she try and work with the existing team before deciding to move on? Did she provide any guidance when making those kinds of decisions?
She actually did not. In that conversation, we didn't poke on exactly what the timeline was, but she did talk about the team. She initially tried having the conversation because she believes very much in having that crucial conversation. So she tried the techniques of moving people to different positions in the organization, and but eventually she said it doesn't work out, and it doesn't work out, then you've got to part ways and start new.
Okay. And the next question is from Kristen. Did she share any strategies for passing the monkey to higher levels?
Yeah, I'll try and answer this one. So I think the way she looked at it is that she wanted to warn us as new project managers not to take on if we come across one that's really a problem that is really killing us, not to just feel like we have to solve it ourselves. And that if you see the people above you more as there to support you and not necessarily there to judge you and your performance as a project manager, you can feel comfortable, at least going to them and saying, does anybody have experience with this particular monkey? And not feel like you have to deal with it solely on your own.
Okay. And from Melanie, which leadership skill or core value from Lillian would you want to personally embody? And I'd like to hear that from each of you.
I can go first. Yeah, she did talk about communication a lot, and she did say that communication involves engaging your team. Communication involves listening to others, listening to those that are experienced. Communication involves, asking questions, not being afraid to step out and say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing. It's okay not to know. Communication involves being assertive and really when you have to, take a stand for what you believe in, then do that. So as for me, I'm a new person on the project. I have no project experience, so I'm learning. And so that's why I think that stood out to me. So I do have to ask a lot of questions with what I'm currently doing. Yeah.
Who's next?
Yeah, I can go next. So what my biggest takeaway was that her experience on both MMS and CRISM, where there's a lot of hurdles that come as you're managing a project, right? So never, when that pushback occurs from up top, and those roadblocks get put in sometimes, continue to push back if you really believe in it. And maybe you will still be able to make progress. So don't just give up when that pushback happens. Sometimes the pushback is there to make you rethink on how important is that for you. And as long as you believe in it, continue to push for it.
Okay, Adam.
Yeah, I think Lil is quite a character. I enjoyed meeting her. She's very enthusiastic and positive, but she combines this kind of a practicality that is, can be tough. I mean, as we noted, getting rid of a large portion of your team, and I really admire that ability. I feel like if I were on that team and she came to fire me, I would come away from that conversation feeling okay, because she's very, very straightforward and positive, even when she's doing very difficult things, and I really admire that.
Excellent. All right, good way to finish it up. Good job, folks. Appreciate the insights and the case study.